Hello, everyone. We are in for a treat. Today's conversation is with author Tiana Laveen, who is one of the deepest thinking women I know. You have to check her out at her blog, tianalaveen.blogspot.com. Her books found on Amazon are just as deep as she is. She tells dark tales of people who are on the edge of what we call civilized society, amongst other genres that I'm much too afraid to touch. I had the pleasure of meeting Tiana at a writers' conference in Tennessee, but first met her amazing mind through her novel, The N-Word. It was a book that I would not normally read, but after reading the summary, I was intrigued. Intriguing is a perfect word to describe this talented author. So let's get right into our conversation. Welcome, Tiana Laveen. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Losing You, Gaining Yourself and our writers series. Today we are speaking with author Tiana Laveen. Tiana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, let's just go right into talking about your writing. When did you start writing and really what got you going, and why did you decide to really stick with it?
Okay. Well, it's always been a passion of mine. I've actually been writing since I was a little girl. I actually taught myself how to type on my mother's old typewriter. So I was always a very imaginative child. So I used to make up stories in my head, and I had a tendency to daydream a lot, so much so that I would get in trouble in class at times. But I was an only child, and I was rather introverted, and this was just a way for me to express myself along with drawing and painting. I just enjoyed these sort of creative outlets. And writing has just been, I don't remember a time actually when I wasn't writing. So it's been a long time love affair for me.
Wow, that sounds really close to my story because I'm the same way, except instead of daydreaming, I was putting books inside of my textbooks and holding it up so the teacher would know that I was reading a book in class. So tell me about what you like to read. Now, the things that you read, the books that you read, genres, are they the same as what you write? Or do you write something a lot different than what you relax to?
Well, not all the time. My favorite genres to read actually are usually horror and psychological thrillers. I do enjoy reading romance as well, but it wasn't really something that I always chose from like a store or library when I would go in. I enjoy writing all genres, and actually with my own writing, the books that I've written, I have a tendency to combine various subgenres with romance, such as I'll make sci-fi with romance, paranormal with romance, crime with romance, things of that nature. So my writing voice flows well with romance. So for me, it just works out. So whatever I paired with, whatever I'm feeling at that time, or whatever story's coming to mind for me, romance is kind of like the chicken stock, and then I just add things to it. Because you'd be hard pressed to find just a straight romance for me.
Who are your favorite authors? Authors that you read now or that you've read maybe over and over again? And why do you
My
like them?
My all-time favorite author is Stephen King. I just find that he's wickedly creative, and I respect ingenuity, creativity, and I think he's a master of his craft. I love how he, career-wise, has been a first, and he's done things that many other authors in his same genre have not, and he seems to be pretty true to himself in his writing. So
Yeah.
it's not that even that I've loved every book of his, but I respect the fact that he seems to write what he wants to write, regardless of public outcry, and I have great respect for that.
Yeah, he is quite a talented, skilled writer. I
Hmm.
appreciate his style as well. So let's talk a little bit about your books. Now you have some series. Tell us about A couple of the series that you've written and what has inspired them.
Okay. What's funny is initially I wasn't what I would coin a series writer. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I have a tendency to get bored easily. So sticking by characters book after book after book was not something that I generally wish to be invested in. However, occasionally you come across a character that just keeps going and the possibilities are endless. I managed to tackle series by either making them double book releases, I call them double novels,
Mm-hmm.
such as the Race to Redemption series, which features the books The N Word, and the second book of that is Word of Honor.
Right.
Or I will make a series such as my Saint series and Raven Maxim series. And those are actually all standalone. Now, the Saint series, they are contingent upon each other. But if you jumped in like to the third book, you would still be able to pretty much digest, I would say, 85% of the book without the previous, reading the previous two books. That's
Okay.
just how I prefer to handle my series. I don't like cliffhangers. And then as far as the Raven Maxim series, those are all extremely independent books. The only thing they have in common is they take place in the same city and state. So the same neighborhood. So that's the what makes them, I guess, cohesive. And I've had various inspiration for all of my books, and rather they are a series or not. So inspirations for me are typically a dream I might have had, or some thought that kind of morphs and grows into something unexpected.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
since my favorite is the N word, what inspired that one, that series, and Word of
Um,
Honor?
well, yeah, I decided to expand on Aaron's story, the N word base, because, okay, first that started off as a novella I wrote and published years ago in the Cross Climax anthologies.
Uh huh.
And so I expanded the N word. And now, initially, I believe I was trying to fathom what couples could I not see together. And of course, one would think of extremes or total opposites. And in this case, it was a white male race supremacist with violent tendencies, acute intelligence, which goes against the stereotype of what we would consider a racist. There's this ideology that they're all country bumpkins, they're toothless and stupid. And so I wanted to work with a framework that was the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted this character to have an admirable work ethic and a killer instinct. Not killer so much as murderous, but to be so very aware,
Mm-hmm.
of himself. So it's not what one would imagine falling in love with a black Southern school teacher that teaches special needs children. So I asked myself the question basically, but what if? What if this happened? Okay. And come to find out, I have received emails from people who have told me they either knew of something similar happening or they were involved in a relationship that was like that. So it actually was not as far fetched as maybe even myself had initially imagined. So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's awesome. So, what is your favorite of the stories that you've written? What is your favorite story, or and what is your who is your favorite characters? So give me like two favorite stories, two favorite characters.
All right. Let's see. I like them all differently, and some I like more than others. I guess I'll do the two favorite books first. Smoke and Mirrors is one of my favorite books that I've written. And let me think a second one. I like them all differently. They're just like you're asking me to choose between children here.
I
you
know,
know,
isn't that terrible?
I guess the N word. So I would say Smoke and Mirrors and the N word are my two favorite books that I've written.
Mm-hmm.
And then my favorite characters I would say are Saint is one of my favorite characters, and I think my second favorite is Exion.
Zion. Okay. Because of the blurbs that I've read about the Saint, I'm very interested in looking into those books, and I just wanted to know, is Saint books paranormal, or are they fantasy adventure? What type of genre are they?
Okay. Here's the deal with Saint. I will first say that he is very raw. He's the rawest character I've ever written. He's unapologetic. He has an extreme potty mouth. The sex scenes are the most gritty in the series. So, with that withstanding,
Okay.
um, the Saint books are paranormal. He is what's called an angel child, meaning that he's human, but he was marked, if you will, by angels. So he is here on earth to basically uplift and help humankind. He's also a sex therapist and a motivational speaker. And
Oh,
his
that's
his
funny.
yeah, and his obsession is actually with black women. That's what he does these seminars on. He loves and worships black women. so Saint is has received my most controversy outside of Aaron as a character.
Hmm.
He has caused and sparked lots of discussion, some of which was quite fiery. I
Wow.
have received probably the most emails about Saint, and some of them uh, were from people that were not happy. And so,
Okay, so
yeah,
what people were not happy with him? Was it black women who weren't happy with him, or was it white people
it
who?
was black men and some black women because he's very brutal in the way he delivers his truths.
Mm.
When he's speaking and doing these motivation, what he calls black women queens, when he's speaking and doing these seminars and he's talking to rainbows, which are men of other ethnicities who are interested in black women,
Hmm.
BEAU, rainbows.
Wow.
When he's speaking at these secret conferences, mind you, when he's speaking at these conferences to these men, and he's involved in all these other underground groups and stuff that kind of revolve around that same concept. He just puts it all out there. He talks about real issues that are going on in America, and unfortunately, some of the things he discussed from the first book of the series, which was called "The Naughty Sins of a Saint," are still going on right now, or even worse. And that book dropped probably about, I think, 5 years ago.
Wow.
And yet we've seen little to no improvement in this country regarding some of the issues he discussed. So it is a romance, but there are these, you see him speaking to crowd of people. In the first book of the series, you watch when he meets his wife, who initially wanted nothing to do with him, for instance. And her
Okay.
name is Xenia, and she's a radio personality. So yeah. So
Now that's
that's Saint.
that's interesting because reading your blog, I noticed that now that you've told me about this particular character, um, your blog is kind of like related to that because you said some things in there just basically speaking to women and the importance of self-respect and really looking at the issues out there
Right,
concerning women and their self-respect, their relationship with men and so forth.
right. Yes.
Okay, now let's talk about writing. When you get to writing your book, you sit down, you get this idea. How exactly do you formulate it? You say you have a dream per se, and then
Hmm.
what do you do with that idea at that point?
Okay. Basically, once I have the dream, or actually, I have a tendency to sometimes have bouts of insomnia. So
Mm-hmm.
after I have a dream, I sometimes it's a 50-50 shot with me. You just never know. I will wake up and I keep paper and pen by me as well as my phone in case I just want to text myself a note. So I'll either jot something down so that I don't lose it,
Mm-hmm.
or I'll text myself something so that when I'm fully awake, I'll be able to see it and then take care of trying to put it down somewhere where it'll be safe and then try to execute it.
Okay.
So now with my style of writing, I'm very visual.
Mm-hmm.
So I translate what I interpret the characters to be seeing, tasting, smelling, so on and so forth, to the best of my ability onto paper. So if I can capture a bit of that, whatever it was from the dream or the music that I heard that inspired me or whatever it was, I'll try to get that kernel and keep that, and then it'll jog everything else back. And that's pretty much what happened with the same series. I saw this beautiful man. He was physically gorgeous,
Mm-hmm.
speaking this massive stage. It looked like Carnegie Hall, and there was just and no, there was no seat available. And there was a sea of men of rainbows, and he was speaking to them, and they were enthralled with him. And that's where that came from. And I woke up and wrote down real quick something to the effect of, beautiful man, looks Middle Eastern, not sure, on stage, tall. I described him talking to this group of men. And that's how Saint was born, basically.
So when you get your idea and you write it down, are you an author that outlines the whole story, or do you just go through bouts of just writing out scene after scene? How exactly do you formulate a book?
It's pretty much a combination of both. What I do first, I call it building a body. I'll put the skeleton down first, and that is my outline. Now, I tend to break my skeleton bones a lot because I listen to my characters.
Mm-hmm.
So if something that I originally wrote in the outline no longer fits with the way the characters are growing, because I'm a stickler for letting the characters do what they need to do and not pushing anything just
Right.
because I thought it was going to go one way. I go ahead and listen to their voices and follow that. So even though I typically start with a loose outline,
Mm-hmm.
it more than likely is deviated quite a bit. I mean, the original premise pretty much stays the same. I have never, from what I can recollect, had an idea for a story and it totally just went, topsy-turvy or turned the total opposite direction. But certain aspects of regarding character development, the way these people think, so on and so forth, has often changed drastically.
Okay.
So I just go with the flow. I keep referring to my outline, and what I tend to do is I outline the entire story. I don't do it by chapter, I'll do it by scene. And then I'll
Mm.
group chapters for me as last. So I do it by scene, and then I'll just put a sentence or two like, this is what's supposed to happen here. This is what's supposed to happen here. And then as I'm building and growing the story,
Mm-hmm.
I'll finish the story in however long it takes, and then I'll that's my first draft. Once I've completed all of that, then I go through again and I put the meat and muscle on the skeleton, and then I go through again and I fine tune, and then I dress it up, and then once I go through it probably a fourth or fifth time, then I send it to my editor.
Okay. Now you have a number of books out, probably about what, 15 out there now, that 15 or
I've
20?
got over 30.
Okay, okay. I'm looking at your page and I'm trying to like count them really quick.
Okay. Yeah, I've written over 30 books. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're a young woman and you've got 30 books out there. This is
Hmm.
so different than the old world where a book could take you a year or two because, we're doing like,
Right.
ebooks and we're putting them out and you're spitting out stories like, crazy. I can't fathom it. And it's a beautiful thing because as I've mentioned to you before when we're at the writers conference, you write so freakingly intelligently and very I mean just not grammatically fit. You're very you're really in depth. You really think out, and your character is extremely intelligent, and they can only be as intelligent as you are. So when you have all these words that you're using and the sensitivities and the intelligence and the real deep stuff that you write about, how is it that how long does it take for that process to happen for you to start a book and finish a book? Or
You
are you
know,
doing like a lot of them at the same time?
I tried to two time and three time, but I am incapable.
Okay.
I have to devote my attentions to one book at a time. I have found that that is the most effective way for me to handle it. Now, if I had a full length novel and I was working on a novella at the same time, I could probably pull that off.
Mm-hmm.
But since I typically don't do novellas, and my books are usually quite long, you're looking at average, you're going to get at the very least 300 pages from me, at the least.
Wow.
So sometimes I've had books that have taken only a month and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had books that have taken 6 months.
Wow.
So, and it's not even the length that seems to be the issue. Well, that plays a part into it. All longer books take longer, not naturally. But it's more so to do sometimes with the story or maybe extra research I need to do. or sometimes I'm just tired. This year, I did force myself to take a 30-day break.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to recalibrate because I've literally been writing probably nonstop for 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
And
And
so
you
my
write full
brain
time,
was
right?
starting, what? I'm sorry?
You write full time, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so my brain was starting to shut down.
Mm.
And so I said, okay, it's time for a break so I can recalibrate. And that did the trick because I don't get writer's block. What I get is just tired. So, that I was like, and I feel a great responsibility to my readers. So instead of me just pushing and pushing and pushing myself and then delivering something that I know was not up to my personal standards, I was like, no, I'm just going to have to force myself to take five, you know.
Right.
So that's what I did, and now I'm unfortunately that has caused me to be behind schedule on a multitude of projects for this year, but it
Mm-hmm.
was necessary.
What is your educational background as far as writing? Did you go to school and take writing? Do you do like workshops? Um, how did you develop
Well,
your skill?
actually, well, in college, I was placed, actually. I tested into advanced creative fiction,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny because I didn't even know that that's what I was testing for. What happened was after I had gotten into, I went to the University of Cincinnati,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was in there, and then there was some sort of testing they gave us. And so then I got a letter in the mail talking about, inviting me to test for advanced creative fiction. So it must have been based on the essay that I had to write out.
Okay.
So I did that, and then I was placed into the advanced creative fiction class, and I was in that class for 2 years. Um, but my actual degree is I have a bachelor's in communications with an emphasis on marketing, but that marketing experience does not help me with books. That's a
No,
whole nother
really?
world. Yeah, that's a whole nother world. So it was in business communication is my actual degree, and I have a certification in human sexuality. I never thought that certification would help me with my writing, but it has helped
Yes, it
tremendously.
has. I'm sitting here like, oh, that explains a lot.
Right, exactly. So that is how I was able to make Saint basically so realistic when he was speaking about, because he did sex seminars too.
Mm-hmm.
When he was speaking, he actually knew what he was talking about, and that is because I did take the courses for that.
Right.
So
Okay. So if you were to talk to someone who's like, well, I want to write a book or I want to be a writer, say like some high school kids or something, would you suggest that they take writing courses and workshops and so forth?
I say that's pretty much up to that particular writer or writer to be. Some people work better from tight structure, and I consider workshops, from the ones that I am aware of and that I have heard about and whatnot. There obviously, it's a class and there's structure, and of course, the class that I was in college, there has to be. You have to follow a syllabus and whatnot. Now, people who benefit from workshops can vary, but there's some people who enjoy, like, planners and timetables and apps that help with this, that, and the third.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, however, the more structured you make things, the less productive and the less quality work. Unfortunately, I am the latter. I am one of those people that cannot be restricted. This is not to say that I miss my deadlines and things like that. But I don't want to have to keep up with something on a daily basis, or if I lose that binder or app is deleted, I'm shattered. I'm
Right.
just old school. I tried the new way and it just doesn't work out for me. And that's the same with workshops. I've taken workshops for other things, but because they were mandatory. And there's pretty much that consistency of the structure. And I'm very hippie like. Okay? I can't do it. I just want an old fashioned notebook and my computer to keep track of what I need to be doing, improving upon and whatnot. So to answer your question, because it wasn't just about me, but to answer your question, workshops are beneficial for people who cannot stay on task and or need some incentive and need that extra push.
I want to go into something that is kind of like a little bit of a sore spot for me. Um, growing up and having all of these ideas and stories constantly running through my head, and wanting to be a writer, because back when I was a youngin in the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
writing was done the old-fashioned way. The whole e-publishing and so forth, that was so new, and blogging was new. I mean, that really developed in the late 90s and so forth. So
Right.
I was taught that writers are struggling artists. You can't feed yourself off of a writing career. So writing was
Right.
not encouraged. And when I would go through these, when I was unemployed, I would go through these things. Well, I got to work, I'm going to sit and I'm going to write this. And I would get these phone calls. Well, can you do this? And can you do that? It's like, no, I'm working, I'm writing. And they didn't look at that as I was really working.
Right. Right.
How is that for you? How did that, through your years, your friends and your family look at you and your creative outlet and wanting to be a writer?
Well,
Getting that support.
yeah, what's interesting is I was working in corporate America. I was working as a marketing director at one point and a coordinator for quite some time.
Hmm.
And I worked in accounting before that. Don't even ask how that happened, but it did. so, um, I, so I was very disenchanted, and this kind of ties into my issues that I told you about previously about control and restrictions and structure.
Hmm.
I don't work well with that, and I tend to rebel. A lot of times, at that time when I was involved in that, I didn't know that I was rebelling,
Right.
but I was. Now, I had stopped writing when I was probably my senior year in college. I just wasn't doing it as much. I was preparing to try to go out into the real world, and I just didn't focus on that as much, and
Hmm.
that was a shame. But when you truly are in love with something, you always go back to it one way or another.
Yeah, so
So, long
true.
story short, what ended up happening was I was disenchanted at one of my jobs, and I found myself writing little stories on my computer when I was supposed to be working. And then before I knew it, these little stories were getting longer and longer and more developed and structured. And I never did anything with them, but they were there, and I
Hmm.
kept them. And then I went to another job, and when I went to this other job, I had at that time actually met my now husband. He didn't work there, but this was around the timeline.
Uh-huh.
So this job, I left that job after, after he and I got married, but I went to go work for a private company to do marketing for them.
Hmm.
I realized that though I was good at what I did, I wasn't happy. I was actually very unhappy. And so I had an opportunity now I was with somebody who was supporting me from an emotional standpoint. And he just told me, why don't you just write? Because he knew that that's what I really wanted to do. I hadn't quite said the words, but
Right.
that's what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And so I didn't even fully feed into that as much. I was thinking about, okay, I can write children's stories because I was actually pregnant at the time.
Uh-huh.
And so, because he and I have been married for about a year at that point. And so, what ended up happening was my son was born, but there were some issues.
Hmm.
And so, actually, right before that, I had insomnia. I was pregnant and I had insomnia. And so I would be up writing and writing and writing. And you may not know this, but when you're pregnant, a lot of times you're very uncomfortable, especially in that last trimester.
Right, right.
So you
I've
just
never experienced it, but I've heard the stories.
right, right. So I wrote, and then I posted some excerpts on Facebook of just these things I had been writing, these love stories. And then somebody I had, one of these jobs I worked at, he was a published author. I didn't know he and I were friends at this old job. He saw it and said, "Hey, you should be published." And that deal actually fell through, and it wasn't anybody's fault, just some things that happened.
Hmm.
But that's how this happened. He was like, "You need to be indie." He really believed in me that much and said, "You're that good."
Wow.
And so that's basically how this all began. And when my son actually had some health issues at one point, and so I was writing again, and I finished the two books I was working on while my son was getting the care that he needed. So
Mm-hmm.
these struggles in my life and these issues that were happening motivated me to delve deep and basically run away and escape into what I loved most, as far as my creative outlets and my passions, and that was writing.
Right.
My husband, and it was another author, Mr. Black, who did this. And without the two of them, I probably would still just have hundreds of full length stories printed out in folders and binders and saved on my computer, and no, they would have never saw the light of day. Mother has always been a cheerleader of mine, so she was gung ho as far as my creative outlets. She was gung ho from the start.
Nice.
And my parents were I would say pretty darn supportive. But I was a little surprised that more of my friends were not. I do have a couple friends. One of them's named Roxanne, who from day one has been a huge cheerleader of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot thank her enough. She tells people about my books. She embarrasses me in public and tells people about them and hands out my cards.
How sweet is that?
Right. That's what you need. And
Mm-hmm.
she has just been wonderful. And I do have several friends who have been just absolutely amazing to me and encouraging. But there are those people too that, and a lot of times you're surprised where they never ask you how your writing is going.
Right.
They never congratulate you on new releases or anything. They don't say anything, and you never really know why. But you just got to kind of shrug and let it go, because if I was motivated by what everybody was doing or saying, then I would never write another book again.
Yeah.
I have to do it on my own. I have to be my own motivator, because there's so much negativity out in this world. You really do have to help pump yourself up. That's how you survive.
That's true.
People don't understand. Writing is not cute. It is a cutthroat industry, and it's very competitive. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Now, see, I wouldn't have gotten that from the conference and stuff that I went to.
Oh no, they don't. They're not gonna show that to you. But I'm gonna be real with you, okay?
Uh-huh.
There is some stuff going on that is totally unnecessary and ugly. And so instead of people uplifting each other the way we should, as women that are writing, there's all kinds of ridiculous things going on. Now, that's not to say that that's an all the time thing. Like every time you look up, there's something. But you just need to be cognizant of that, because if you're thin skinned or you're very, very sensitive, then this is not for you. And that's just the
Gotcha.
bottom line.
Okay.
Because there's always going to be, energy suckers and people who want to diminish your light. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not always haters. Somebody could just genuinely not like what you're doing, and that's their right. But sometimes it's an approach that lets you know someone's motivations.
Exactly.
So you have to keep yourself together. You have to keep yourself surrounded by positive and encouraging people. That is key.
Mm-hmm.
That is key. And you just try to distance yourself as much from all the craziness as you can. Like, for instance, there's just certain, reading functions or whatever, reader functions that I just don't go to.
Right.
And it's not because I don't want to, it's because I just know there may be a certain element that I don't want to be a part of. I know what's best for me, and you'll know what's best for you, and everybody else that wishes to get into this. You'll
Mm-hmm.
find ways to cope and navigate so that you can protect yourself, because at the end of the day, you have to protect your creativity. Creativity has to be treated like a baby. And let's be real, artists are oftentimes very sensitive people.
True.
Okay? So if we're soaking up everything, then we got to be careful what we're letting in. That's all. Just be careful what you're letting in.
I like that. So tell me about your learning curves and your probably your biggest mistake that you made in your with writing, with getting published, even just like your how you invested in something and it turning out negatively. Are there any like mistakes or learning curves that you can give to writers out there who are trying to get to where you're at?
Well, one thing is kind of like what I described of, being prepared that it's not going to be all sunshine and roses. Some people get into this and they think I'm going to make a quick buck. But because the market is so saturated now, because indie writing is a blessing and a curse, as far as that. It allows all of us who wish to completely work for ourselves and have complete control over our writing to do such. It allows for writers who are with a publishing house to also do their own thing on the side, and it allows for people who just want to see, if they can fulfill that dream. It allows that
Right.
to happen. But like I said, the downside of that is the oversaturation of the market and people who are not actually passionate about the craft. They're not trying to improve and whatnot. So people are kind of, some of these readers, we're all readers first,
Mm-hmm.
they're on edge now. Okay, so this isn't like 1998. This is 2017. And so what that means is when you write these books now, your imprint is online.
Mm-hmm.
People can get to you. They can send you an email. They can touch you on Facebook. They can say anything they want to you. So you
Right.
have to be prepared for that. So that's why I talk about, developing a thicker skin.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have that initially. I was very rose-colored glasses a
Yeah.
person. And so I got a rude awakening. So that's what I would warn some authors to understand going into this. Please don't think it's going to be easy and a smooth ride, because it's not. The other thing is, and it's funny about saying mistakes, because I consider every mistake really to be kind of a learning curve, so to speak. But a
Exactly.
mistake I made when I was first in the business was telling some people about a book idea far in advance from when it was published.
Mm.
So basically, I didn't finish the book until many months after that announcement. So that wasn't smart on my part, and I learned not to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Another mistake was not shelling out the money initially to get a good editor who knew what they were doing. Some editors are good at content corrections. Some are good at grammar corrections. Few are well versed in both. And most importantly to me, is you want someone who can handle both, but also can handle your writing style. Your work will suffer if you don't get an editor who understands all of that and can also handle your deadlines, or at least when you'd like for something to be completed.
Right.
So I also made the mistake of not understanding that this is not just about art. This is a business, and if you go into this thinking it's just about art, again, you're going to be in for another rude awakening. And I'm an artist by nature, but I had to become a businesswoman in this aspect too, not just in corporate America, in order to stay afloat. You have to learn about sales. You have to learn about how royalties work, about budgets and algorithms and things of that nature. You're
Mm-hmm.
never going to know every single thing, because this business literally changes on a daily basis. There, things change on Barnes and Noble, in their brick and mortar, and on their website. Things change at iTunes. Things change for Amazon. Things keep changing and changing and changing, because technology is growing and growing and growing. But you need to keep up as much as possible.
Right.
So, yeah.
That was just my computer giving me a message about freeing up storage space.
Okay.
That was not a signal to stop talking.
Okay. I thought maybe I was on a timer.
No, no. Tiana, I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your writing, your books, the whole business of writing. I know so many people are going to benefit from what you have to say to us, and those little parts that we've never even imagined that is part of writing and the career of being an author.
Well, I thank you for having me, and I've enjoyed speaking with you. I truly have, and I do hope that at least somebody will get something from the information that we've discussed tonight.
Definitely. All right. Well, this is the end of our segment today with losing you, gaining yourself. And until next time, keep smiling.